If you're looking for a clean, sober, professional, academic,
well-researched, historically accurate, generally accurate, serious podcast
on Southern folklore, ghosts, bizarre events, and unique people,
this podcast is not for you.
However, if you've decided you can live with that,
then join us for The Strange South.
The Strange South.
Uncle Daddy,
Uncle.
Hi, Patrice.
Hi, Marleah.
Hi, Courtney.
Hi, y'all.
You're happy to be back.
I'm happy to be
Yay.
back.
We are
I've
happy
missed
you are
you,
back.
even though I've seen you both.
She didn't miss us. She missed y'all.
I missed y'all.
Yes.
I missed my microphone and stand and making
She's like caressing her
cocktails for you.
microphone stand.
and I hated being in quarantine again. I'm not gonna lie, it was bad.
You know,
Imagine.
honestly, I think I would love to go into quarantine again. It's still my natural state.
I've got a lot to do, so yeah, I would love to be in quarantine.
It's easy for me to say because I never felt sick when I was in quarantine. Like when I had COVID, I didn't ever really feel sick. So
yeah,
it wasn't a horrible experience.
I don't want the COVID.
No, I
No.
don't. No.
Yeah.
Well,
Second
good luck
round
with that.
Wasn't that great? It wasn't that great, but it wasn't that awful. So
It
at
wasn't
least
like
it
the
was
first
better
time.
than the first time I had it.
Hey,
So-
go get your new booster.
Yeah, boost people.
Yes.
PSA, I got my new booster the other day and I had a sore arm about 12 hours later and that's it. So I can be the person that you know through the internet radio that didn't have a severe reaction to this booster.
Right. Well, I will get my booster, but I'm gonna have to time it for a weekend because I know I will get sick.
We all have all those theories. This one makes everybody much more sick. Well, you have a theory about blood type.
Yeah,
And
I looked it up last night. That was an early theory that's not really panning out, but they are still trying to figure out the people who say they've never had it yet or who were
Super
probably
Dodgers.
asymptomatic. Yeah, so
Mhm.
they're really kind of recruiting those people and studying them, and they're linking some genetic things.
Ooh, so
to
if you
it.
if you haven't had it yet, contact your local
My
whatever, I don't know,
husband-
researcher or see
American
how
Red
much they'll
Cross
pay you for your
does
blood.
get their
My
draw the blood.
husband totally would not do blood. He'd be like, no.
well,
doing this.
I think they're going to have to do that if you're going to be part of this. They'll draw
No,
your blood.
He's like, fuck you. I'm not doing
Will they
For
that.
buy your
antigens.
plasma? Can they plasmas?
I don't know. That
It's a
was
good
really
side hustle.
shallow research that I did.
I see.
As
I was
all
doing-
the research that we do on this show.
I was going to say our research itself is kind of like folklore.
Yes.
I've just been walking around asking people, "Have you had COVID yet?"
That's
No.
a lot
What's
more
your blood type?
scientific than what I do.
Yeah.
I do
Like, what's
personal
your
research,
blood
too.
type?
Yeah.
Okay, 3 people in one day did tell me they were A negative blood types and had not had COVID to their knowledge.
Oh, wow.
I'm just saying.
I
Don't know what that means. I'm just telling you, 3 people in one day.
I had to ask my parents what my blood type is, and I found out and immediately forgot it again. So I still have no idea what my blood type is.
The only way I remember mine is because it's A+.
Woo!
A+.
team.
I'm AB plus, AB positive.
That's not as easy to remember.
Yeah, I don't forget it. I used to donate blood all the time too. Though,
Oh,
to
see,
the Red Cross.
I could
so.
never. I've told you the story
Yeah.
before. I could never. So no.
So I had a card forever from the Red Cross, and I would see it. I
want a
see
card?
it from reading it.
Mm-hmm.
How I remember it.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Donating.
Oh,
Oh,
well, please tell us about these wonderful
Oh.
drinks that we're eating
As I-
oranges for.
So I'm like squishing through the orange.
Yeah.
So I'm
So
actually
good.
drinking a gin drink,
Oh,
Shocking.
Shocking.
but it's the Dread River gin that you know
Yes.
I really like. So it's kind of a classic. It's called an Orange Blossom. I didn't come up with a fancy name because I didn't really change the recipe much from traditional, except I cut a little of the sweet vermouth and added a little more of the gin.
Yes.
So it's sweet vermouth. You have to have really good sweet vermouth because it is about a third of the drink. So
Wow.
Quality vermouth.
yes, quality. Antica Formula,
Mm.
which is an Italian sweet vermouth that's about $50 a bottle.
That's all I was hearing was Vera Farmiga or whatever her name is, who's in The Conjuring. Go ahead.
Formiga. Vera. So that and fresh squeezed orange juice. So
Mm.
took about 3 large oranges to make enough for us to have 2 drinks each,
Mhm.
and gin shaker.
It is delicious.
Pour
It
the
is.
martini
It's very
glass, and
good.
Patrice has done really well with her martini glass. She's on
nothing.
Not a
Okay.
drop.
Because it's so good. Yeah, please knock on wood. It is so good. I'm like, okay, I need to finish this before I start my story.
Yes, because you go first
I
today.
go first.
Well, while you finish, I'll do some of our business, some of
Okay.
our pre-show business. Friends, we are doing a live show. This should come out before we do this live show, and you might still have a chance to grab tickets. If so,
Right.
we're going to be in Oxford, Alabama on the 8th of October at 7 p.m.
7 p.m.
7.
And
Get there at 6:30. Not at 7.
yes, doors open at 6:30. It's a really fun time. It's at Romarin et Corbeau in Oxford, Alabama. You can get tickets on our website. You can find it on our Facebook page at the Strange South Podcast. So definitely go look. I mean, it's really fun. It's an intimate space. It's a very cool little
really
shop
cool.
where you can
Yes.
also buy pretty awesome witchy stuff and
Mhm.
books. And there
Right.
are usually plenty of things that kind of work really well with the kind of stuff that we talk about on the show. So,
Right. Exactly. I think
you know,
there might be a care package also like being put together.
mhm.
So-
it is Halloween month.
It is Halloween
Mhm.
month.
And y'all know we're not like 100% spooky all the time, but in
Right.
Halloween month, we generally are. So that'll give you an
Yeah.
idea of what to expect.
Yes.
But we'd love to see you there, and we will legit see you there. Like,
Mhm.
we do photo ops with people, we meet people, we chit chat, we hang out. And as much as that causes my social anxiety to skyrocket, I will still enjoy seeing
Right.
you and
will
talking
have
to you.
awkward conversations with us.
Super
We will
awkward.
sit there and be like, okay, yeah, not good at small talk. Thanks for
She
coming.
says this, but she's actually really good at it. So-
What? I don't think so.
Anyway, one way or another. And
Yes.
Courtney's just shaking
I'm
her.
shaking my head.
She'll be
I'm
fine.
so glad that you're going to be there, and I won't feel awkward, I don't think.
No, she won't. She'll go out. Courtney will go out and hug you and feed you drinks. So
Yeah, I'll probably do a virgin cocktail version of our whatever we're drinking that night. I'm
Yes.
thinking of
Right.
infusing some alcohol for it.
yeah, it's gonna be
Lovely.
super cool, and it's getting on to fall. So
Right. And we're going to have Strange South merchandise there that you can
Yes.
purchase. Like if you want a t-shirt or if you want a coffee cup or whatever
Mhm.
that we have available
Mhm.
handy.
Stickers. We have some stickers still.
Stickers, yes.
I have some stickers still. They
Oh,
are my
good.
business card stickers. They're even more special.
Right.
So I have just a couple other things. We all, the three of us and our fams, went out to Springville, Alabama yesterday to Homestead Hollow Art Festival, Art and Craft Festival.
Mhm.
And y'all know it's like, it's September. So it's the time. It's the time of
Yes.
year where all these arts and crafts and all kinds of things, festivals are going to be happening. And it's going to be
Right.
like every weekend, you're going to be like, I want to go to this, except it happens the same weekend as 4 other ones that I want to go to.
Everything. Yeah.
Right.
Because everybody's so excited about it being fall. So we actually had the same thing. We had 2 we wanted to go to, and we
Right.
chose one. And it was fun, and we happened to see 2 of our friends and friends of the show there.
Supporters, yeah.
So hi, Marcy and Marleah. It was
Thank
good to
you.
see you. We
Yeah.
didn't chit chat for too long because our kids were dying for corn dogs, but we were really glad to see you. So
Right.
I made
Yay.
a line for the food.
yes,
It was very long, so I waved from the distance. I was like,
Yes.
I
We hit
need
it,
a
like,
junkyard
right
dog.
at lunch. And, it's fall in name only.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
still hot as shit.
it wasn't as well. I think
not
fall
as hot
at
as
this
it-
time of year is really just it could have been worse. Could have been
It-
Thursday.
It
Could have been worse.
Thursday, exactly. Oh
So-
my God, Thursday was like an oven.
Yeah.
worst.
So yeah, but we had a fun time with
We
that.
did.
Yeah, look out for it. So they have another one in November, I think.
Yeah.
They have November, May, and September, it looks like. So
yeah,
if
but
you're
we
ever
were
interested.
also talking that it's not really our target. Like,
It's not. Who did
Some
you
of
say?
us.
What did you think the target audience was for this one?
Yeah, it was like elementary school teachers.
Yes, there was a
We
lot
have-
of live, laugh, love happening.
Yes.
But it was fun, and they had like an ironworking
Mhm.
demonstration.
Yeah,
They
it
had real quilters, like good and great potters.
A,
there.
a moonshine still
Mhm.
that
we
was
could-
actually
but they didn't
working.
give us any.
They made
No.
us smell it, but not let us drink it.
That was-
and I
and
had
it
to have
actually
a
smells pretty good.
conversation with them about that. I said, "Wait a minute, where's the tasting room?"
Right.
Well, you weren't alone because that other guy standing next to it was like, "You're missing an entire revenue stream here."
I
Right, he's
know.
like $10 a shot.
I
You
know.
you can be
We
making
would have paid it.
bank.
I
We would
would've.
have paid it. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's no question.
There's some cool cabins though. The cabin we went to was really nice over the
Oh.
creek. I made them come back inside. I said, "You missed the best part of this little."
Yes.
It was a real cabin from
Yeah.
1900. A family
Mhm.
had lived there. They had the story behind it.
5 children,
it
mother
was
and 5 children in this 2-room cabin.
2-room cabin.
Yeah.
with a very nice back porch.
Oh, so
that was
nice.
screened in right over the creek, and it was
Mhm.
the sound was like a noisemaker machine sound. Like it was
Right.
like
It's
a
the
fake.
Like it's where you would want to sleep.
The
Yeah.
ambience was just like,
Oh, I'm sure people did. That's why they had
Oh
it.
yeah,
of
there was no
course.
air
That's-
conditioning.
it's
So.
screened
I
in
think,
porches.
as far as like fairs and stuff that we do, one thing that is kind of like in our radar here should be the Oddities and Curiosity Expo
They keep on popping up on all my stuff.
that comes up every year, and they were in Atlanta in February. So I'm thinking maybe
Ooh.
they'll come back to Atlanta in February.
Okay.
And that may be something that we could do as well.
We'll have to hit them up.
Yeah.
So yeah, that'd be awesome. If y'all know anything about that one or if
Yeah.
have been before, shoot us a line and let us know what you think.
Our vault. Yes.
Or yes. And I guess that's most of our
Yeah.
pre-show. Oh, if you, we did also that this weekend has been a busy weekend for us. We've done stuff all together all weekend long.
Yep.
Oh,
we
it's
had,
been awesome.
I know it's been
Yeah.
nice. We had Friday night movie night.
Movie night.
And we finally watched Nope.
Nope.
Which I've
and which we said several times.
Nope. Which came out on my birthday, and I've been wanting to go since my birthday, and we finally got a chance to watch it, and we will be talking about it in our after talk
Mhm.
today after the show. So if you're interested in hearing our review / just shooting the
Commentary,
shit
yes.
about,
and we have a lot to say about it.
we actually do, because we also we have disagreements.
We do.
So that always makes it more fun.
Yes.
I secretly recorded us through the whole thing. I
Yes.
forgot to tell everyone that I was doing that.
It's kind of funny.
Not the whole thing, but several times.
So we'll be talking that after talk. If you want access to the after talk, if you haven't heard this before, the patrons get access. It's an entire sort of shortened bonus episode every week that they get access to for being patrons, and we thank you guys very much for that
Yes.
support. And if you want access to those, go to our Patreon and sign up. We have levels as low as $3 a month, and it's still super helpful to us. So
Yes, absolutely. It's the reason that we are still around.
mm-hmm.
Oh, there was something else I was going to say.
Mm.
Oh, I really hope that you had a recording of us going, nope, 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 nope.
I don't
nope,
know.
nope,
I
nope.
haven't
I don't
listened to
think
them
she
all.
did. We were trying to listen to him. There's like that part in the barn where Patrice and I was like climbing up the back of the chair for a second. Mm-hmm. So
Pretty good.
more on that later.
More on that later. Right. And if you haven't watched it and want to watch it, you may not want to listen to the after talk.
Yeah, it will have
True.
spoilers, I'm sure.
Yeah, we'll talk about it and then we'll spoil it.
Yes.
So if you haven't watched it, we'll talk about it and then we'll tell you when we're going to spoil it. Right. I believe I am first.
You are
Yep,
first.
You are. I listened to you all.
Did you finish your
And I
drink?
missed you.
I did finish
Good
my
job.
drink.
Well done.
Thank you. Thank you. I finished my drink, Mommy.
There's one more waiting for you. Somebody tried to put a drink limit on me recently.
I did.
Mm.
I did. You
Oh,
wanna know
not just
why?
me, us.
Oh.
Because I started thinking that we would have more luck, like getting all of our post-show production stuff sorted out if maybe we weren't trashed when we finised the show.
Trashed is not a word I would use.
No, we are not trashed. No.
Okay, well,
trashed.
we're not of sound mind.
I'm never of sound mind. What are you saying? Speak for yourself,
Oh
girl.
my gosh.
All I can do is speak for myself.
Oh my
She's speaking for
gosh.
herself, Patrice.
Okay.
You go ahead.
All right. I may resemble that remark. I just unplugged my computer.
Oh no.
Oh, no. So this, what I'm going to talk about, and this is a big trigger warning. Like,
Oh.
we're all like,
Wow.
I'm just going to get real serious here.
Oh no. What?
No, I'm sorry. So trigger warning. I'm going to be talking about sexual assault
Okay.
Oh no.
and kids,
Oh my God.
and it's going to be bad, y'all. And I'm
Okay.
sorry. So if that is not something that you want to, hear right now, but I think this story is really important because I didn't know anything about it, and it's pretty near us.
Oh.
And it's just something to think about, especially if you have children. Anyway, so of course, Kenneth Steed, who constantly feeds us ideas and other podcasts, and he's just been a great supporter of the
Yes.
show.
Mhm.
Brought this to my attention. And when I first saw it, I'm just like, Kenneth, I don't know if I can talk about this because this is really heavy and really upsetting. But I went and I bought the book that one of the patients wrote about this. And then I went and listened to the podcast that kind of like talks about this. I'm like, yeah, this is something I would want to be aware of, kind of deal. So today I'm going to talk about the Anneewakee
Oh my God.
Institute, otherwise known as Camp Hell.
This is going to be good.
Yeah. So
I've listened to this podcast too.
Yeah. So the podcast we're talking about, Josh Thane in 2021 did a whole huge, like 10-part podcast on iHeartRadio about Camp Hell, Anneewakee. And Anneewakee is a treatment center for emotionally disturbed youth, and it's located in Douglasville, Georgia. Douglasville is located like about 20 miles west of Atlanta, and it's actually considered part of the Atlanta metro area.
Is it really?
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
so
like the very far outskirts
on
the west
as
side.
They expand.
Yeah.
Now, when this was happening, I don't know if it was metro. I doubt if it was metro area at that time.
Yeah.
It was still probably considered outside the city limits.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, first, like I said, first I've ever heard about this. So a little history about it. Anneewakee is also known as. Oops, sorry.
I was like, do you have some chips under there? What's happening? I want some.
There was something attached to my computer that was like making me uncomfortable.
It was a potato chip bag is what it sounded like, but it was just
cellophane.
clear plastic.
Yeah, it's a cellophane bag.
No chips.
I apologize. All right, so a little history about the Anneewakee or the Wake. Anneewakee is Cherokee, meaning land of friendly people, which is like a really sweet little, but it's going to ruin you on, like, I'm going to ruin you on this name with this whole story. So also, I highly recommend, I'm not going to be able to cover everything because it is so vast.
Yeah.
And some of it, while not under the name Anneewakee, some of it, I mean, as you know, some of it's still going on, but we're going to get there. So Anneewakee was the largest medical facility in Georgia at the time. It was created in 1962 by Louis Petter and his business associate, Britt Baxley. And they later expanded to Carabel, Florida, and then they opened up a girls' camp in Rockmart, Georgia.
Oh, that's very close.
Yeah.
Rockmart is
So we're not going to cover the Rockmart.
right across the line.
Yeah, because, I mean, it's just too much to talk about and equally as devastating. So we're just going to cover the boys' side of it. Louis Petter was very charismatic. He likes to be known, or he liked to be known as Dr. Petter, although he did not have a legit degree. What happened is, like, back in the 40s, he got his master's in psychology and was kind of grandfathered in to, like, being, like, he was already practicing just with his master's instead of having his doctorate. And so when they, like, made it a thing, it was like, you got to get your PhD and you have to go through additional training, especially in something like psychology, in order to be like a psychologist and treat youth. But he got grandfathered in at that time, which was unfortunate. So back in the 40s and 50s, like after World War II, we know that, the teens of that time, like rock and roll was coming into play. We all saw, like, the warning film, Dope Fiend,
Reefer Madness
kind of thing. Rebels Without a Cause was pretty much on parents' forefront of their mind. And so during this time, Petter was, a counselor at a Boy Scouts troop. He also, he got into this line of work with youth very early on through the Boy Scouts, through the YMCA in Macon, Georgia. He was also a pastor of a Baptist church. And he established himself as kind of a local figure in the community, and regional, actually, in the community. He was a psychologist for the courts. He became, like, a probation officer for the state of Georgia. He even, like, went to PTA meetings and was, like, he established himself as a juvenile delinquency expert. And he used his influence in the community and standing pretty much to gaslight his accusers throughout his whole career. So he started from the get-go, established himself, and was just an awful, evil person.
It's weird to think how, like, much easier even it would be for somebody to do that in the internet age.
Right.
Because like before, people could do basically just repeating, I am an expert, I am an expert, I am an expert.
Right.
And eventually being looked at as an expert. And now it could take you like a third of the time to do that because you've got so many followers on Instagram or whatever.
Right. Exactly. Well, and even, being a Baptist preacher,
Yeah.
that automatically gives you a respectability that's undeserved,
Mhm.
or being somebody that's, calling themselves a doctor. You don't have to like show your PhD papers or, to prove that you're, or disprove what you
Mhm.
are. So he worked the system, and he got to know like all of his church, what are they called? Church people.
Congregation.
His church congregation, and was an upstanding citizen. And he was in like Flynn with the politicians, and all the cops knew him. And so he built his kind of quote unquote empire under this pretense of being an authority about juvenile delinquency.
Mhm.
And he worked in Savannah as a probation officer for a little while, but Savannah kicked him out because of inappropriate behavior. Inappropriate behavior being that he used to measure boys' penises because he had a theory that the longer the penis, the more in trouble you were prone to be. So he came up with all of these asinine, like, I am the expert, I am the authority, this is legit science, don't question me while I do all this pedophilia.
Oh my God.
So he opened up the Wake in like 1962, and sorry, I lost my place here. And the kind of youth that would be brought there, he established it as a camp for youth who had sexual trauma, who were committing sexual acts. It was also kind of like a gathering place. Like courts would send juvenile delinquents there. If you committed a criminal act, you were sent to this rehabilitation camp. If you like robbery, assault, smoking one joint,
oh my,
like you were sent in with this whole group. Parents, and it was really targeted to like upper middle class in Atlanta because, starting in the 60s, we still had, was it corporal punishment? There was still like paddling going on in school. It was still okay to like beat your children into submission. It was not seen, like it is now, as like the abuse and what it carries on into their lives. So even like they didn't have diagnosis like ADHD or ADD or anything like that. So these children were also clumped into this. So if children were problematic to their parents were like, oh, this place down in Georgia with this guy who's been an expert since, the 40s in Anneewakee, they'll fix my child. So he targeted, this audience, this upper middle class for, emotionally and kind of, he didn't coin emotional behavior, emotional behavior or disturbed behavior like that. But within the medical sense, it was like not, they explained this in the podcast. It was not like a universal term. So they were very loose, like as far as who they could admit. So they admitted like, court ordered children, but and children from parents who like had, mental problems or behavioral problems. But like I said, if a parent caught their child smoking one joint, they could also send them here. But when they sent them there, he charged in the 70s $90,000 for this treatment.
Oh my God.
So it was like a high price tag. And in today money, that is almost $700,000.
Holy shit.
So he was charging this to the parents for this treatment, for this camp to rehabilitate their wayward, disturbed children.
Well, he wasn't getting that from the state or people who were sending it. So he was trying to like make money off
He was
Oh, yeah.
right.
I'm
exactly.
sure he wasn't getting anything for the.
I guess that's
Not,
why
he was getting
targeting.
something, but he
Right.
wasn't getting any like that kind of money from the
right.
people
Right.
who were court ordered.
Yeah,
Right.
that's why he'd go
Exactly.
for
Yes.
like
And that's why
middle class, upper
and
class
that's why,
white
like,
families.
it got kind of a wiggle room as far as like
Mhm.
the classification. And I think the whole thing, like, he was state. I don't know. I could be talking to my ass. He could be state funded, like if he was like a state institution, but
Mhm.
also accepting private.
Yes.
I
people.
think I was going to say, I remember that too being a thing because I feel like he did have support from the state of Georgia.
Oh, yeah.
At some level, you know,
Well,
like
he had to if the court
financially
sent him.
yeah.
No, absolutely. Yeah. And the child welfare people, they absolutely supported him and they sent children
Ugh.
to him.
Okay.
When a parent would send their children, he would meet with the parents and meet with the child, and he would tell the parents, he would set them up for the grooming that he was fixing to do. So he would tell the parents, he's like, look, we are going to isolate your children for an extended period of time, and you will not be hearing from them. You'll not be able to communicate with them. They will not be able to communicate with you. You can write them letters, and then after that isolation period is over, then they can get your letters and you can get their letters, kind of deal. And he's like, and in these letters, you could probably, he's like, normally what you can expect to hear is like the children being scared, the children complaining about this, and this. He's like, that is all normal part of the procedure. So he was prepping the parents to hear about these complaints and ignore them because it was part of the process. And so, you know, it wouldn't raise any red flags.
Because he's like saying they're going to manipulate you and try and get you to get them out.
Exactly. He's like, but you need to stick with it because this is part of the process and this is going to help your children. What he initially instituted, there is something in the 1940s called the wilderness therapy. And wilderness therapy is a lot like the Marine Corps training.
Mm-hmm.
And it is where you break the children down and then you teach them self-reliance and a set of values. And you don't give them time to get into trouble. Like you keep them occupied throughout the day. So, and you teach them to work in groups as well. This whole wilderness training that he initially like based off the Anneewakee camp from was actually created by salesmen and businessmen in Texas as part of something that they're like, we're going to take these boys and we're just going to make them work and give them
turn them into men.
And we're going to, because this was the 40s, there's a lot of Native American appropriation, as we see from the name. You know, the leaders are supposed to be called chief, and you know, they had like Indian names for each groups, and it was just that whole, if you can think of like the 40s vibe or the 50s vibe right after the war, as far as like, you know, you were in the war, you were a man, you know, now you come home, you make your children men, you send them here, you know, cowboys and Indians, I don't know. But of course, you know, Anneewakee twisted that and not so, I mean, Anneewakee twisted it, but it was Petter twisting it to satisfy his, I don't even know what to call it, evilness. So the process when the children got there, and I read a book, and by read, I mean listen to a book. Anneewakee, One Boy's Journey by Stephen Selim Evans. And it was on Audible. And it was not so much a book, but kind of like you have a friend's friend who's telling you a pretty gratuitous account of something really awful. And it was pretty like, if you go out and look for that book, like it was like very telling, and it was horrific what he went through. But just be prepared because there was, you know, gratuitous talk.
Like it's explicit?
Explicit, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. A lot of people did have good experience. Like it did shape up a lot of people, but it did a lot more harm and damage than it was really worth. It's in the middle of the woods. It was a dirt road. And when it started, there were no buildings. There was nothing there. It's just like you're out, you know, the first kind of test boys that came out there, they were like, there were no buildings. There was nothing there. So first 3 months was like isolation. And the boys that started it in the beginning, they actually, like, we're talking 5 to 18-year-olds. 5-year-olds, 7-year-olds, 10-year-olds were cutting down trees. They were like building these buildings, laying foundation, doing carpentry. So he used child labor to actually build the camp in the beginning. And with this, they built these isolation rooms. When you got there, everybody went into an isolation room. And when I talk about isolation room, I'm talking about, think about jail and think about solitary confinement. So they were put into like these rooms that had basically a slot for food, and they were not allowed to go outside to speak to anybody for 3 months. And that was like their first taste of it. And if they did certain things, then they were allowed to come out of the rooms. But that was like, everybody was like, that was part of the breaking down process. It's like you were completely isolated, weren't talked to for 3 months.
Imagine doing that to a 5-year-old.
Imagine that to doing
Like,
it.
What would that do to a 5-year-old?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And these were called, quote unquote, quiet rooms. And they were also known as the evaluation and observation rooms. You know, when you were locked into this unit, and you were all categorized, you know, in these units by age. So, you know, they didn't let the older boys be with the younger boys. They kept like the younger boys and then, you know, middle-aged boys and then the older boys together. And they all had Native American tribe names and stuff. So these locked units was like a level system. They had like red, green, yellow, blue, and each level granted certain privileges. And so when you had the privileges, then you had like more demands for participation with on-site therapists. So you got like to see therapists, and you had to basically jump through their hoops to get to the next level. It was a very stair-step system. So it's like if you did what you were told, then you got to this level. If you like screwed up, then you got sent back down to the quiet rooms. And, you know, after you finish the color system there, and so even in the quiet rooms, like if you gone up in the quiet rooms, you were let out, like, but you still had to go back in. You know, you weren't outside. You didn't get to go outside. You were still in the building, even going through all the color rooms, right? The guy that I read the book, or that I listened to the book, he said that, you know, he was in that room for 6 months.
Oh my.
And it was because he wasn't following he wasn't jumping through the loops for them. He understood, he figured out like what they were trying to do. And he was like, fuck you, I'm not doing this. Mm-hmm. And so, but they kept him there for 6 months and it broke him. And so he finally, you know, started doing what they wanted to do, and they gave him a little more freedom. And he was like, okay, this is nice, this little freedom that they're giving him. So he's wanted more freedom. So he started doing more of what they were asking of him.
Which is what they're going for.
Which is what they're going for. Exactly. And so once you get out of the color level system, you graduate, then you are moved onto a campsite. And right before you move to a campsite, you have like the camp leaders come and kind of pitch what their camp is and why you should join them. Of course, when the children are in there, they don't explain this to the children. They don't say like, hey, if you do this and this, you get to do this. They just automatically, you know, keep them in there, and the children kind of have to figure out why why they're being punished, or why they're not, you know, let out of this room or not able to talk to anybody. Once they go to the campsites, in each campsite, there are groups of boys put together, and the campsite are basically labor camps. So one camp would be carpentry. Another camp would be electrical wiring. Another camp would be, I don't know, digging ditches. You know, like each one had kind of their expertise, and they would go and they would either pick out the boys, or the boys would get, you know, I don't know how much control they had over it. But anyway, so that you would go into this camp. And so, you know, and this is boys like 5 through 18. And so when you got there, the new boy was taught by the last new boy as far as what you're supposed to do. They camped. They slept on the ground, kind of deal. And so, you know, they were supposed to write a schedule, wake up every morning, or on every beginning of the week, they're supposed to write a schedule for that week, like an hour by hour schedule. Like You get up here and you eat. And they were like, they cooked for themselves. They did everything, for themselves by themselves. So they did a lot of their own cooking. They hunted for their food. They dug porta potties. They cut down trees and shaved them. They put molding in cabins. They did wiring. They built A-frame cabins. They set trussels. They put on roofs. They dug a lake. Like a guy was talking that he was 10 years old and he helped dig this lake that's there till this day. They cut grass with sling blades. They cleaned out sewage ponds. And then at the end of the day, they were supposed to meet back with their group, review what happened. If there was any fighting with the boys, they were supposed to tell that to the leader and solve their problems. And then the next day, just repeat, over again. And they lived off the land. They hunted, they built, they did forestry. And there was a lot of just fucked upness going on, at the time as well. But, they did hiking, they did horseback riding sometimes. It was considered vocational therapy. And they had these labor groups or these work groups, but they also had these school groups. So it was the reason you were doing all of this labor was so that you can move up the ladder to be the school group so that you could actually go to school. So they were supposed to go to school, but the camp wouldn't let the work group go to school, which fucked up a lot of children when they actually got out because they had to repeat at least 3 years or so before they could graduate from high school.
So the parents are probably told that their children will be going to school.
Yes.
And then, but when they get out and they haven't, they're just going to be told, well, your child never graduated or did the right stuff to get out of this to this. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And the whole time, again, communication, they can talk to their parents and stuff, but by this time, it's a cult. They're brainwashed into saying the right things for their parents and everything. And also, their groups. So they were very tight, each of their groups. So if somebody ran away, what they would do is they would have your group go after the runaway. And when they caught the runaway, they beat the shit out of the runaway to make sure that he never did that again. Or if you slept late and missed your morning group meeting, then your group came in and picked you up and threw you into the lake. So punishment a lot of times was dealt by the group itself. So they were also self-policing at this point. Counselors and instructors. So it was not all the counselors were bad. Although when the counselors were bad, it was really bad. Petter sold it to counselors working in the field as this great outdoor experience. You're going to be helping these youths. But the legit people who majored in psychology that came in, and counselors that came in, they sensed that something was wrong with Petter. And it was Petter was touching boys a little too much. He was a little too handsy. And they also noticed that kids, and we're talking young kids, because the kids in the work camps were buff.
I bet.
Muscular. They all no body fat, and they were all very extremely strong. But the younger kids, Petter would come have them for the weekend as a special therapy session. And so 2 of the counselors, Roger Wren and Robert D'Agostino. I remember this.
Thank
you. They came in and they noticed, they took a canoeing trip down to Carabella, Florida, which is where they later opened up a camp. And they just noticed it was just weird. And then they actually caught Petter in bed with one of the kids, an 11-year-old kid, in the act. And they're kind of what the fuck, man?
Oh my God.
And Petter automatically was this is not what you're seeing. This is not what's happening. And they're yeah, it is, what's happening. And so they talk to themselves and they're we need to, this is not cool. We need to leave. But then they're also but we're leaving all of these children here who need support. to be victimized by this predator. And so they stuck around for a little bit, but they basically, they tried to keep like their group away. And they were like, they had their eye on Petter. And so when they would see him circling around and paying attention to like one of the newer kids coming in, they would confront him and they were like, you do not touch this kid or you're going to have to deal with me. And like Petter would go, like they have communal shower and Petter would go into the shower and stuff. And one of the counselors actually during the testimony said that Petter told him that homosexuality was good for the boys, in particular homosexuality with staff members, because it got a good relationship with an adult going.
That's not homosexuality. That's child abuse.
No.
That's a completely different thing.
It's completely different thing. But again, consider the period of time of how people viewed. Yeah.
I have a big problem with these psychologists who did not immediately go turn him in, though.
Right.
Did they have someone to turn? I mean, it seems like there would have been a group that they should have reported him to,
according to what year this is. I'm teaching
this
it.
Is
well,
the
behavior in the 70s.
Yeah, it's in the 70s when this was going on. And there was bad counselors there as well. So the counselors, they did quit. They quit and they immediately went to the sheriff.
Yeah.
And the sheriff didn't do anything about him.
Yeah.
Because he had everybody in his hand already.
He was making buttloads of money. He was already well established in the community because he was a Baptist preacher. He talked at PTAs.
And they're like, you just can't attack this man without proof, and nothing you can say could possibly be construed as proof, surely.
Absolutely. They went to the state welfare, child welfare. They went to lawyers. They went to the news. They could not do anything until a child came forward and like said, and even then, like who's going to believe some of these children who have behavior problems?
Because they're like the most vulnerable demographic.
Absolutely. So nothing was done. So they eventually ended up getting an affidavit from a couple of former patients. But as soon as that happened, Petter started a smear campaign against the two former counselors. Okay. He started calling them communist.
Oh my God.
And he was like, don't listen to them because they're communists. They're nuts. They're lying. They have grudges and stuff like that. So as soon as he called them a communist back in the day, you could sue them for libel because communist was a big, ugly word back then.
Yeah.
And so that's what they did. They're like, well, if we can't get him for abuse, we're going to sue him for libel. And hopefully that will draw attention. And of course, it didn't do anything. So next, what they did is they went and they sued him and tried to challenge his license for the camp. Good. And that started the ball rolling. And so there was a hearing and they went after, because there was something about having like a competent person above reproach leader for any kind of medical, facility or something like that. So they went after that, him. And they had, people, they had children or former children come out and like talk about, in explicit detail what, he did. And they were just, and there's testimony, there's like written testimony that they read in the iHeartRadio podcast, like so you can listen to like how the lawyers attacked these children and how, or former children, former patients,
former children. I am a former child.
Me too.
Right? I'm still a child. And so, of course, they try to discredit the patients and, call them deviants. And the thing about it is the lawyers for Petter had access to their medical records. So they could use their medical history against them and humiliate them, which they absolutely did. And so while this has happened, Petter's still making just tons of money. There's so much, like I said, there's so much on the money side of this that's going on with like insurance agencies, politicians, businessmen, all getting into this. Like it's like some Epstein shit kind of stuff going on. Even like Petter started taking once a year the boys to Mexico and was implicated in sex trafficking. He took them to a brothel there in Mexico. Finally, like, you know, getting out in the news, finally, like a lot of, it basically came down to like money and having people dealing with all that money kind of like set them up to screw. It's like how they got like whatever gangster because of his
it's always money laundering that does it. It's not like
it's
the
not
moral
the actual moral stuff. Exactly. So in 1988, Louis Petter pled guilty for 18 charges of sodomizing former patients, mental patients, and was sentenced to 20 years in prison. And that included 12 years of probation.
And this is after he's already been doing this for 25 years.
25 years. No.
Holy shit.
Thousands of youths, of children.
That's gross.
It's so gross. And not to like, this is just one camp. So they had a girls' camp. And we'll talk about that in just a second. I'm not going to go like into much further detail about this. So Louis Petter only served 7 years.
Son of a bitch.
And he got out in 1986, I believe. No, 1996.
I was going to say, I think you said it was 88 that he was
charged. He got out in 1996. And then the civil suits came about. So like former patients started, saying, oh, okay, now maybe people will listen to our story. So 4 girls from the Rockford camp sued him for forced labor and sexual and mental abuse from the counselors that they had there. And they won like $5.4 million.
Well, that's
which
good.
Was shocking to everybody. And it's mostly shocking to the insurance company who they were suing as part as like the whole conglomeration.
I hope they actually got that money then.
They didn't get millions after they divided it and lawyers and stuff. I think one of the girls says she got like $300,000, but she was expecting like $1,000.
Yeah.
Like they had no clue. But also in the girls, and I didn't listen to or haven't really read up much, and it's really kind of hard to find like info, especially like after he went, like I have a feeling there's a lot of shit buried. There's a lot of people who he was like, there was one other counselor implicated, but I have a feeling there's a lot more out there that have not been exposed.
Well, and didn't you say at the beginning that he had a partner too? Like, and he doesn't really factor in.
He doesn't really factor in. And the counselors that I talked about that took him to court for libel, they liked the guy.
Oh, the other guy?
Yeah, they liked his partner, and they called him like an upstanding man, and he was great with the kids, and there was nothing wrong with how he treated them, and they would approach him and they're like, how come you are tolerating this? And nobody wanted to like out, I don't know, go against them. Anyway, so the civil suits come about. One of the things I was talking about. So forced labor for the girls. Yeah. One of the girls says that they would have to like bend over, like do kind of like a tabletop pose, and they would put like 90-pound bags of cement on their back, and they would have to like take them uphill because again, they were building the medical facility and constantly expanding it. So he was getting free child labor. And
he was getting paid to make these children labor.
Paid, on top of all of that.
I remember hearing her story on the podcast and her talking about how many, like all of the medical and health issues she had in the years afterwards because of that. Yeah.
I bet she didn't even weigh 90 pounds.
Yeah.
In 1992, he went up for parole, and so many people came forward that he was denied parole.
Oh, thank God. I thought you were going to say the opposite.
No. In 1986, however...
96?
Sorry, 86. I'm sorry, y'all. 1986.
96.
In 86, he got out.
Wait, no, in 90, no, you said in 88 he went in.
Yeah, that has to be it.
Anyway, so at some point.
Right. Yeah. Okay, yes, at some point. In chronological order that obviously have fucked up. He got out of prison. And then other major lawsuits came to, like 110 former patients sued him for like $432 million, like in 1990. In 1999, and this is the only thing, because I tried searching on him like in his later years, like after he got out of prison, like anything, like where was he, when did he die, kind of thing like that. The only thing that came up in 1999, he wanted to overturn his probation or overturn being a sex offender.
I don't think you can do that.
Because the sodomy law was what he was prosecuted with. It wasn't abuse. And so when they got rid of the sodomy law, then basically he was like, he didn't do anything wrong in the eyes of the court.
Son of a bitch.
Besides raping young boys. And so, you know, he was removed. He wanted to be removed. And I don't know if he was removed. I want to think he was removed from the sex offenders list.
That's fucked up.
And he also wanted it removed so that he could travel out of country to go to property that he owned in Mexico.
Interesting.
Yeah. But he actually ended up living in a small ranch home in Georgia for 20 more years. And he died on January 18th, 2018 at the age of 98.
I hope he was miserable. I hope he died in a horrible way.
I hope so too. So during this time, or before this time, sometime in my fucked up chronological time frame, the Hospital Corporation of America took over to keep the medical license of the camp. They changed the name to New Anneewakee, Anneewakee. And then they changed it because that was still like too much juju going on with that name.
For real.
So they changed it to Inner Harbor Hospital, and now Inner Harbor LTD, and now Inner Harbor for Children and Families. And, you know, there are still facilities out there, and there is no federal oversight.
Oh my God.
And the people who also committed crimes, like they said counselors would come in and have sex with the boys. And then if they found out about it, the counselors would let go. But it was like such a predatory thing. And some of the boys that went through it, like they're like, it saved my life. They're like, we heard things were happening. It didn't happen to us. You know, it made me self-reliant. It gave me, you know, something to look forward to. It made me a better person. Although there were some fucked up things that happened, like isolation and like just getting your ass beat. And then others who absolutely, to this day, our lives are shattered and just unbelievable psychological damage to just so many people.
Because of one rich white man with a master's degree.
Evil bastard. And that is my depressing story. And I promise for October, I will not be talking about depressing stories. But I thought it was very interesting because it is so close to us.
Yeah.
I've never heard a word of it.
I hadn't either.
Nobody talks about it. So one of the things...
Hard to find it, but I found his obituary. He was married.
Oh, yeah.
The whole time.
He had children. Yeah.
They don't have the children
in
listed.
the business.
Yeah.
They were all part of the business and you know, boards or whatever.
Yeah, that podcast was really the only thing I could find that was about it.
Fantastic.
It's a really good... Camp Hell is a good podcast.
Camp Hell is a fantastic podcast. Lots of good, insightful, like he interviewed people.
And you know what?
It's disturbing.
It is disturbing. But you know what? To his credit, too, he did interview the people who said the things you're saying about, like, this changed my life. I didn't have this experience personally. I just, you know, did these other things and it was good for me, which, you know, it's funny. When I was listening to they're building their own cabins, they're doing all this, I was thinking like, well, you know, I mean, maybe we are sometimes too precious with our kids. You know, maybe they're capable of more. 5-year-olds shouldn't be cutting down trees. No. You know, nobody should be in isolation for 3 months.
Right. Or any. And
there was another part of it when they did talk a little bit more about the Florida place that they were building. And they said that they would cart the boys down there to help build the Florida facility. And one of the things that always sticks in my mind about this was they were talking about those massive pylons that build docks, those massive trunks that they put in the ocean to put a dock on top of. They coat that with like a toxic tarish coating,
like Cristo,
that goes over it all the way from the top to the bottom, and you're not supposed to touch it.
It causes cancer.
They had these boys taking these massive, like several hundred pounds probably, right? Like pylons, and carrying them bare chested and bare armed to the ocean and helping to set them in the ground. And they had burns. They had like chemical burns all the way up their arms and all across their chests from doing this work.
Yeah.
And it's like, man, if you have a question about whether these people had any serious notions of actually helping anybody, think about that kind of shit. Like that there was no mistake in that they had no interest in these children.
No, they really didn't. Yeah. It's heartbreaking, and it's also, it needs to be a wake-up call to everybody, and especially parents. It's like, if somebody tells you that they are going to isolate your child, you say no. Children should not be isolated for whatever reason. You should always have access to your children, even if you want your children to be isolated away from you, right? But even, you should always have access to your children in any kind of medical situation.
And
and if not, question and then get them the hell out.
And if you have any question about that, like, we all just went through the pandemic. We've all seen what isolation, even not complete isolation, just within the family unit can do to kids. And like psychologically, like that should be a major red flag.
Oh, absolutely.
Major red flag.
Yeah. And don't let anybody gaslight you. Fuck them.
If it feels weird to you,
it is.
Listen to your gut.
Absolutely. And that includes like doctors. Like Marleah and I were just talking about this, about like, I had to sign a form, or I didn't have to sign it. They gave me a form saying like, if my child wanted to have like a private conversation with the doctor to discuss whatever things right before he was to be examined. Of course, I would be in the room when he's examined, I would allow this. And I'm like, and I know my child, he's never going to do that. But I was like, if there's something that he doesn't feel comfortable talking with the doctor, I was like, I'm going to be right outside that door. Yeah. Then that's fine. But, anything else, I like, no. Protect the children, y'all.
Yep. Good story. I mean, bad story, but good story.
Yeah.
Bad story, well told.
It's an important story. I think that we need to like discuss more and bring it out to the light so that people who take advantage of their position, whatever it is, should be like held accountable. And they should rot in jail.
Yeah, man. And then hell.
Although I don't believe in hell. But yes, hell on earth. All right, y'all.
Let's refill.
Yes.
All right. Do you want more Strange South every week? We can help. You can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and you can join our Facebook fan group, Fans of the Strange South Podcast, to keep the chat going with our whole creepy community. Do you have a story idea for us or a story of your own to share? Email us at stories@thestrangesouth.com. Plus, if you join our Patreon, you not only help support the podcast, you get an exclusive bonus episode for every show and a discount on merch. You can find links to all of these things on our website, thestrangesouth.com, along with photos, links, and show notes from every episode, Strange South t-shirts, mugs, and other goodies. See you there. My arthritis is going to kick me in the ass pretty soon. I'll tell you an arthritis story a little bit later. Hold on. So, do you have a thought?
Oh, I do have a thought. I have like a little correction because I thought about it when we were on break.
That was
so.
Fast.
Are we back?
We are back.
We're back.
Yes, thank you, Courtney.
I didn't know what we wanted in that.
We'll let Randy decide.
We'll let Randy decide. Absolutely. So the Anneewakee. Thank you. Like, I listened to it all weekend and I still can't fucking say the name. So anyway, the whole corporation was, I said that they got sued for like $300 and some million, right? That's actually wrong. They got sued for like maybe 30. Well, actually they settled with the insurance company because after the girls sued them and got $5 million back in that time period. And everybody was like, oh, shit. Especially the insurance company.
Yeah.
The insurance, I think they settled maybe for like out of like 110 people for like $30 million instead of going to court and being dragged out for years and probably paying a whole lot more. But the 300 and some odd change was actually what the facility was worth, or the assets the value that he had built up with this or the multiple medical facilities that he was running. Blick. Glad he's dead.
Yep.
All right.
Glad he's dead.
And now for something completely different.
Glad he's dead.
I don't see a through line. Maybe we'll find one. I don't know. I don't see a through line this time.
It's okay. I don't want a through line.
I will tell you. We're going to start this evening with a poem.
Oh, yes.
Oh, yay.
Lovely.
Did you write it?
I didn't. No. It goes.
There once was a man from
No. It goes. Late last night and the night before, Tommyknockers knocking at the door. I want to go out. Don't know if I can because I'm so afraid of the Tommyknocker man.
Tommyknocker.
Have you heard that before?
I read the book.
You read the book?
Yes.
So in 1987, I think was when the book came out. It's a Stephen King book. It's called Tommyknockers, if you haven't figured that out already. And the story of the Tommyknockers book is that there's this town in Maine and somebody starts digging, I don't remember why, and accidentally excavates this big metal thing. As more of it is uncovered, this person starts to feel smarter and becomes like a super genius. And she's like, oh my God, this is a miracle hunk of metal. And so they keep on like digging up this thing and they feel like really, really compelled to like unearth this, whatever it is that they found. And meanwhile, you find out they're also like torturing their dogs on the side and having psychotic breaks and shit. And it's because the metal thing that they're unearthing is an alien spaceship that is converting them all to aliens by some sort of gas. Do you recall? Because I've never read it. So.
I've never read the Tommyknockers, but
it's been a minute. And I remember nothing.
There was a movie or a made-for-TV movie.
That's what I remember. The only thing I remember was Jimmy Smits pulling out his own molars on TV. See, that's what I remember.
Stephen King cannot do movies.
No.
So I have a really hard time watching any of his made-for-anything movies because it ruins the books for me.
Well, listen, apparently, according to Stephen King with this book, he said he couldn't do books either. He said this was the most awful book he'd ever written.
Yeah.
He blamed this book on drugs and alcohol.
Wait, he couldn't do books or movies then?
Yeah, he was like, he was pissed about this book after the fact.
You know, he's a great starter. He cannot finish for shit.
Yeah. That's what she said.
That's what she said a lot.
It's the name of her sex book.
That's the name of your sex book. In this story, they start calling the aliens the Tommyknockers. So if the people in the town start converting into this weird genius psychotic state, they start seeing that they've turned into the Tommyknockers. And that name comes from the idea that these aliens had come down in the spaceship and were knocking on the hull of the spaceship from inside because they were trapped underground.
Oh.
And so like the idea, and you may be correcting me if you like this book and have read it more recently or whatever, but I think all the aliens died and there's some gas built into the spaceship that's like meant to kind of repopulate the race and send them back to wherever they came from. And so, you know, that's the idea. So it's still this idea of something knocking on something underground is where the Tommyknockers came from.
Knocking.
So I looked this up though, because Stephen King said, I heard this poem when I was a little kid and I heard the first verse, but I made up the second one. Well, it kind of turns out it's very likely he also made up the first one.
Oh.
That like so I looked on Google Conversations and there was like a whole thread on this. And somebody had said like, I've heard something with this timbre before, like a nursery rhyme, but it wasn't like that. And the one that the first person said went, not last night, but the night before, 2 tomcats came knocking at the door.
Oh.
I went downstairs to let them in. They knocked me over with a roll-in pin. And then other people had that same one, but it was like 29 robbers came knocking at the door. And then it was actually a jump rope, like a skip rope rhyme that you count down or you count up. Exactly. It's like it's the right rhythm for that, right?
Right.
And so then you count 1, 2, 3, and you count all the robbers that made it into your house. So it turns out he didn't even make up the poem. He just thinks he made up the poem.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
But in spite of all this, a Tommyknocker was actually a folkloric creature.
Yeah.
And is actually, I guess. They don't really ever die.
Well, if you're telling the story, it is current.
It is a folkloric creature. We are reviving the Tommyknockers.
You're telling the lore now.
But it's not an alien. It's it's a folk creature, and the stories of Tommyknockers come from old country, like across the seas, old country miners, like tin miners, and those stories came to Appalachia from people from the old country who came overseas to work in mines in Appalachia.
I didn't know there were. I guess that would make sense. Tin mines. I was like, you don't hear about tin mines. That's just weird.
But they came here. They would come here to work in coal mines, or they would come here on the East Coast, especially Virginia, West Virginia, and Kentucky. That's coal mining territory.
Where all the caves are.
Yes.
And we know what's in the caves.
We know what's in the caves.
Mammoth cave system.
Knockers. There's and up to Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania's big mining country. But also out west, a lot of these people would also go out west and do gold mine.
Right.
So like Nebraska, Wyoming, California, lots of people would go out there and do the same. West Virginia and Kentucky we say these are the South in our definition, right?
Yeah, duh.
Big coal mining areas. And this is since the 1800s. So people came specifically for the mining jobs. Like somebody would send them a letter and they'd be like, oh, I'll be right there. And they'd come across the sea and they'd come take the mining jobs, and they would bring their lore with them.
Right.
So I don't know. I don't really know how this got to Maine. Like there's not coal mining in Maine. There's like granite mine. There's like limestone mining.
You mean because of Stephen King being in Maine?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I don't know how he got that story really and equated it with Maine.
Well, he probably could have talked to somebody from there.
I guess so.
And then he was just,
Because there's mines, but there's not. I don't think there's that kind of mine.
Again, he said he was drunk, so he might have heard the story in West Virginia.
He does not have to stay in Maine like his whole, he can travel.
I know his whole, but it's weird.
But he always sets his things pretty much
stays in Maine. It's like everything on Earth always has happened in Maine for like the whole history of humanity.
Right.
Including alien civilization. As I started looking about this, I'm actually kind of surprised I never talked about mining before. Because it's such a huge, it's a massive deal in especially like I said, West Virginia and Kentucky. And it shaped Appalachian culture and economic systems and,
right.
Opioid addiction.
Oh my God.
We all watch Dope Sick, right?
Yes.
Black lung disease. There's a lot that's happened because of mining. It gave people jobs and it created an economy, but it had a price. So I'm sure that's a story that I'll be doing another day.
And children with no fathers.
Exactly. And that's not going to be the story I do today.
And children who died in mines.
But we promise you, we all know that story and we will be telling that story in the future. Our through line is child labor.
Child labor.
Yes. Oh, what a sad through line that is.
Fuck.
So
let it go, y'all.
So, so one of the folk stories that got passed around from miners that were coming from overseas was the story of the Knockers, and this came specifically from Cornish people. And I was sitting there thinking, I don't actually know what Cornish people means.
I don't either.
Until I was like, well, they use the metric system, and the only thing I could think of was Cornish hens, Cornish game hens, and Cornish Rex cats. So I was like, this is the land of tiny chickens and ugly kittens. That's just what Cornish is.
I don't know about those cats.
Have you seen them?
No.
Oh, wait,
I don't
wait.
want to.
No. I've got a picture. I'm going to pull it up.
Cat.
Cornish Rex. Have you ever seen the Cornish Rex?
Rex?
R-E-X.
Like T-Rex.
Yes, I've got a picture. I've even got it prepped for you. Wait, I'm going to show it to you. You all can just sit in your cars and wait. See these ugly cats?
Oh, God. Yeah. Somebody put a meme up with the big old eyes.
Right?
I know
Remember
somebody
on the fan
who
group?
has 3 of these.
Really? The Cornish Rex?
Well, they
They
look
look
like
like
these.
caricatures.
Or Sphinx? The Sphinx cat looks a lot like these. The naked ones?
No, it's not naked. They're not naked. They're
Okay.
these.
Well, so anyway, I really seriously was like, okay, so we've got tiny chickens, ugly cats, and that's what you are if you're Cornish. But it's a sorry. I'm sorry if you're
Is it
Cornish.
not in the UK?
It is.
Is it not England?
It's in the UK. I also had to look up how to properly refer to the UK because I always forget that, like, okay, so we got the British Isles.
Right.
We got like
Mhm.
Britain. Great Britain is the England one.
right.
So Scotland is above England. And then
Mhm.
if you go down underneath, you got Wales on the side. And then if you go down in the very tippy toe bottom, that's Cornwall. Like down there in the tippy toe bottom.
Is Cornwall Cornish?
Yes.
I did not know that.
Cornwall creates the Cornish people. And so it's a Celtic nation. So,
okay.
you know, like in Ireland and Northern Ireland are like off in the island to the side.
Mm-hmm.
And then so Cornish people were a Celtic minority group in Great Britain.
Okay.
And they did tin mining in Cornwall for like 4,000 years.
Shit.
Like-
a lot of 10.
Forever. They
Right.
did. That's just like how they lived. It was their thing. When they started coming to Appalachia, it was going to be for coal mining jobs, which is not actually, or for, like I said, gold mining. And there were so many Cornish people in the West in this time period that the definition of mine, there was a joke that you defined a mine as a hole in the ground with a Cornish man at the bottom. That was like what they said in California. There are similarities between tin and coal mining, but they're not exactly the same. Like coal is softer, tin is like a hard mineral. So there are differences. It's more finicky and stuff, but the atmosphere is a lot the same. So, you know, you can go down like long declining tunnels, which is what we see a lot when we're talking about like the Kentucky tunnels and like the tunnel systems and stuff that you can
Right.
access through these doors and like walk down these great shafts. But they also sink shafts that can be like in Kentucky, there's a coal mine that has a 1,200 foot deep shaft
Shit.
to get down to the ore.
I know.
I play Minecraft. I know
about
that
mining.
feel. I know that feeling. There's, 1,200 feet of this shaft, which isn't even the deepest shaft in the world, not
Right.
even close,
Right.
is the height of the Empire State Building.
Wow.
So if you're going down an elevator down this shaft to work for ore, how long do you think it would take you to just sit and listen to this creaky ass elevator and watch the black get blacker? You know what I mean?
You have to be a special kind of person to
Yeah.
do that.
For real.
I could not do that.
Me neither.
Like I would sit there and think about the earth pressing in on me
Yes.
the whole
Woo.
entire time.
Yes, absolutely. And I think
Don't
any
you feel that
reasonable
way in the
human
basement of the library too?
A little bit. Not gonna lie. Yes.
All basements with like flickering fluorescent lights.
And like, 16 stories above you.
No big deal.
So this, they knew how to do this kind of work, and they would come, in coal mining, there has to be some sort of ventilation, because you're down here and there's all these natural
Mhm.
gases that are escaping, and you've also pulled in this diesel equipment, in certain time
And
periods.
there's no oxygen. down
And
there.
there's also dust from drilling and blasting. So you have to have, and before I didn't even know this, before the Industrial Revolution, the only way they could get this ventilation was by lighting brush fires in the right places to pull surface air down into the shafts and into the mine tunnels. And I was like, number one, that's fucking genius. Like, I don't know how people did things like
Right.
this before.
Right.
And then they got these massive, like really cool looking, weird ass ventilation fans that would sit up top on the surface. And they look like massive, like steampunk water wheels that just like to pull the air around. But, I always heard, there's a song about it, The Canary in the Coal Mine. You
Mhm.
always hear about that. And I always thought that was like, the person would walk ahead with the canary. And then if the canary dies, you can't go down that way.
Mm-hmm.
But the canary goes with you. And when it dies, you have to leave.
Right.
So it's like you work in this gaseous environment until the canary dies.
right.
And then you have to get out because there's only a certain amount of time before it's going to kill you too.
right.
Like it's not as pat as
Like you just release it and wait and see.
it's
You go, you stay with it.
it's very dark.
right.
It's a dark time for canaries. But so you're doing this, if you're coal mining, like you're moving around in these close tunnels, you're digging, drilling, blasting, loading up these mine carts to send coal back up on these rail cars. You know, that's all real shit. Like loading ore into rail cars and then up elevators to go all the way back to the surface.
Harry Potter style.
Harry Potter style, except maybe with goblins.
I know.
Then like the mines were worked generally 24 hours a day because rich people want to be rich. And so it would be 24 hours a day in shifts. It didn't really matter if you were day or night shift because once you get down there, it doesn't really matter what time of day it is. It's going to be just as dark as dark. But
the darkness.
I know. It's just even thinking about it creeps me out.
Yeah.
Thomas Edison was actually asked by a mining company in 1914 to develop a rechargeable battery-powered lighted mining helmet. He was specifically requested to do it because before then, they had mining helmets with open flames in them. And candles and lanterns were the ways that they were lighting these shafts. And they're dealing with fucking natural gas.
Oh, yeah.
Coming out from these mine shafts.
So we want some sparks happening, right?
Exactly. So that hundreds of men could be killed at a time and often were killed at a time. So in I don't know if I'm saying this right, but it's Monongah, I think, West Virginia, their coal mine in 1907, a miner was wearing a lighted open flame lamp on his head and it sparked and lit gas into an explosion that blew out the infrastructure of the mine tunnels, caved in the roof, and also was so strong that it blew out the surface structures.
Oh, shit.
So like the power of the blast actually damaged the surface of the ground and ruined one of their ventilation fans. So they might have been able to rescue more people, but once that happens, you've got carbon monoxide and nitrogen and then carbon dioxide. No, wait, carbon monoxide is one of the fumes. Then nitrogen mixed with carbon dioxide is another fume. And there's no oxygen involved in any of that. And so these guys are stuck down there and there's no such thing as breathing apparatus that can protect you from this at this time. So rescuers could go down, but they could only stay for like 10, 15 minutes and then they would have to go. 362 miners died in this one incident.
Shit.
And they also, like you were saying with child labor, there were probably more people that died because they would just kind of surreptitiously bring their wives and their children down to work with them while they were in the mines. And they wouldn't have been accounted for. This is this is an unusually high impact event, but like fatal accidents happen all the time in coal mining.
Well, they still do. And like,
they still do.
Not like we have not heard of any in our lifetimes.
Well, and there were, just in recent
years.
Yeah, there have been more. And there was one article I found, there was a common story. There was a driller who hit really hard rock while he was drilling for coal. And he would put in like 5 or 6 holes and would fill each hole with gunpowder and set fuses. Because you hit hard rock, and if you blow that hard rock out of the way, then you can get back to your job and not have to worry too much about drilling through this hard rock all the time. So he would set the fuses and go around to a safe distance, and then he would light them and blow the hard rock out, and then he would go back to work. Except then the shift would change, and a new driller comes down the shaft, and he goes back home and goes to sleep. And the new driller didn't know that anybody set fuses, and there's one fuse that didn't light. So this driller is drilling through this rock and hits the cap of gunpowder that didn't light with the fuse and has no idea that there's anything like this happened. And like when that happens, he explodes.
I'm sure.
And there's nothing left that looks like a person.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Like this is the shit that happens in coal mining in this time. So it's kind of like, it's terrifying.
Yeah.
So if you can't deal with like even just the fact that you're down there in the dark, sometimes sometimes with a crew of people right near you, but sometimes you're in a tunnel by yourself.
Right.
And you're just hearing like water dripping and you're hearing things clattering every once in a while down the way. And every time something falls, you would just get reminded of how far underground you are and how empty the space is. And like the timbers that are holding up the walls would creak and there's no light.
Right.
And you've been there for 5 hours.
Yeah.
And it's like, in order to deal with that, you'd have to lean on like superstition or religion just to make your brain stay straight, to say there's something protecting me here. And I'm not just going to die every 5 seconds. I'm not going to die. I'm not going to die. Because when you're in the quiet moments, all you're thinking about is that guy that just got blown up by his drill and realizing that like that could be you next time. So you can't think about that. So you're thinking about whatever you can think of that's going to keep you safe. And that's where the Tommyknockers come from. In Cornwall, the Tommyknockers were like gnomes, like dwarf creatures. They were like leprechauns and brownies. They're only like 2 feet tall. And some people say they were like greenish, but they had really super large heads and really super long arms and wrinkles and white or red beards. And they would generally just dress like miners, like whatever a normal miner's outfit would be. This is what the knocker would wear. And they called them knockers, not Tommyknockers in Cornish folklore. So they were like nature spirits, and they could be mischievous, but mostly they were helpful. So they might come in and steal your tools. They might come in and blow out your candle. But most of the time,
gremlins, right?
A little, but they were less nasty than gremlins most of the time. They did say that there were some that were like malevolent and would cause cave-ins. But generally the idea was that you would hear knockers leading you out of a place where there was going to be a cave-in. There were different times where it seemed like they would lead you to ore. And if you want to read a story, like if you want to read an academic paper about how the different economies of mining impacted how people looked at knockers.
Oh, wow.
Like I can give you that link.
Holy
I'll put it in the show notes. It's massive and it's really kind of fascinating.
I would love to read that.
It's like it's like when they worked for big companies, they thought this about the gnomes. But when they worked for themselves and they would make a profit off of it, they thought this about the gnome. It's really interesting.
Wow.
So anyway, they looked at the knockers as these creatures that are going to warn them of impending doom. They're protecting you. And so just like with other fae creatures, there's a reciprocity involved here. Like they're not going to help you if you don't give them anything back. And so one of the things that miners would do is their wives would cook them a supper or a lunch or whatever, and they would take it down to the mine and they would eat it in the mine, and there would always be an extra cake for them to leave for the knockers. For Santa Claus. And they were Cornish saffron cakes.
Did you make us Cornish saffron cakes?
Oh
so I made you Cornish saffron cakes.
Marleah.
They're not exactly right.
What?
But
They don't look wrong.
Yeah.
But they're supposed to have, I don't even know what currants are. Hold on a second.
They're like a raisiny thing.
Oh, they look fantastic.
Currants are like raisins, right? That's what I thought.
Check it out.
But apparently they're different.
So these look like kind of hard rolls with raisins in them.
Yeah, they're sweet rolls, and they're sweet yeast rolls, and they're
Smell
flavored with
delicious.
saffron, and they're supposed to have currants.
Saffron's really expensive.
I was like, holy shit, it must not have been like this, because I fucking found it, but I found it at Walmart and it was $18 for an itty bitty vial of saffron.
It's always been expensive
So I was
in my
like,
lifetime.
oh my God,
Right?
these people were living in it if saffron cost that much. But so these are Cornish saffron cakes, and they're cooked with raisins because I didn't have raisins, but I like them better that way, I think. I don't know. Anyway.
It's good. Well, I love saffron to begin with, but
I had never had it.
I like saffron shrimp and stuff, but like I said, saffron is so freaking expensive. It's like a luxury.
Yeah, and it's like these little slivers of
The
flowers.
threads.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're little, and so you can see the little tiny blossom of the flower petal at the end of them. But you pour boiling water in them, and you let the water infuse
it
with
turns,
saffron,
like,
and it
yellow.
turns bright orange. It's so
This
pretty.
had it looked like a crescent roll shape, kind of, but it's much more dense.
It
Like
probably isn't supposed to be.
I don't know. It's good.
When I was saying I was going to tell you my
really
arthritis
good.
story, my story was that this recipe calls. So it took me all morning to do this because it's a yeast bread. So
Marleah.
there was a lot of resting, but it calls for a 15-minute kneading period,
No.
which seems like it shouldn't be a lot, right? But
That's
I'm
a
sitting
lot.
there like, holy fuck. Randy's standing over there for a minute before he goes out to work on my shed, and I'm like kneading this. He's like, what you doing? And I was like, I'm supposed to knead this. I started my timer. I was like, how much is on my timer? And he's like, I don't want to tell you. I was like, how long has it been? And he's like, it's been like 3.5 minutes. I'm like, my shoulders are starting to burn.
Oh
my
my
hands are
God.
hurting. So yeah, kneading is not in my bailiwick anymore. But I'll put this recipe.
Currants are
anyways.
also known as gooseberries.
Currants are?
Mm-hmm.
See, I really just thought it was a British word for raisin.
That's just delicious.
But I guess it's not. So anyway, there's more here if y'all want them. But
Says they're native to the temperate regions of the northern hemisphere.
I don't even know what that is. Are we in the temperate regions of the northern hemisphere?
We're in the northern hemisphere.
Cool.
Not very temperate. It's all over the place.
We're just hot.
Mhm.
So anyway, these are the little cakes that they would leave out for the knockers to basically like secure their protection. It's like the knocker mafia.
Right.
This is how they paid them. And so they wanted to stay in good favor. And there's like as a side note, I think it'd be wrong to not mention that over the centuries, you know how lore changes and it like picks up different flavors. Well, this was flavored with anti-Semitism for a while.
Mm.
For a little while, if you saw a picture of a knocker, it would have like a hooked nose and a really wide smile. And it was very Shylocky. And they said that the knockers were the souls of the Jews who had called for the crucifixion of Christ. And they had been punished by making their spirits restless and making them work in the mines for their whole afterlife. So, you know, it is important to recognize that that's part of it. You know, that's kind of in there. That's also in that same research paper if you want to learn more about it. But when the Cornish moved to the New World to mine, the knockers, I'm not really sure why they became the Tommyknockers, but that's the name change. And one of the other things that changed was that anti-Semitic part just somehow fell away because it wasn't part of the history that people recognized. So it just didn't occur anymore. So in the U.S. and Appalachia, they did believe that the Tommyknockers were gnomes and tricksters, but because there's less of a belief in fairies here, they kind of merged more into the ghost story idea. And they started to say that the Tommyknockers were the spirits of miners who had died in the mines and were trying to ward other people away from their fate.
Right.
So every mine, like we said, had people die in it. There wasn't a mine that didn't have a fatality.
Right.
So it's not like it was specific to one thing. Like everybody had it.
That's where they had like, it's been how many days since somebody died.
Exactly. And then they have to turn it back to zero like every 3 days. So my favorite story that I found of this was from the Lewisburg Journal in Lewisburg, Pennsylvania. I know that's not Southern, but it's a cool story from 1905. And it was by a writer named Harry Beardsley. And he said the miners believed invariably that the ghost of a miner killed in the mine returned. And sometimes that would mean like the carts would move by themselves. Sometimes that mean the elevator would start working. Usually they're only heard. They're almost never seen. And he said, a mining friend of mine told me of a warning which came to him once in a narrow escape. He was working in a mine into which the water flowed in such quantities that they had to keep pumps constantly working to draw the water out of the mine to the surface. And he said my friend was in charge of the pumps. So when each shift of men finished, he would have to inspect them all. And the ore was lifted from the mine on an inclined shaft, like we were talking about. And the cars that ran the ore up the shaft were called skips. So the pump inspector, their shift had finished and he had visited 4 of the pumps and he was about to start down the shaft to the 5th pump, which is 500 feet below the ground. And then he felt this like prickly feeling and he started to feel like afraid in a way that just didn't mesh with the things that were going on around him. And he heard a voice over his shoulder say to him, "Don't you go down that shaft tonight." Ooh. And the miner stopped and he said he could even feel breath on his neck.
No. But yay.
And he felt a presence, but he was like, I'm a grown human being. You know, this is stupid. And he went down to the pump. So he reached the 500-foot level and started to inspect the pump. And in the tunnel that was on either side, if I'm understanding this right, the water stood as high as a man's head about. You know, that's how much water was filling up this mine. 100 feet above where he is, while he's inspecting the pump at another tunnel, a skip has tons of ore in it and it's crawling up the inclined shaft. He suddenly hears like this crashing, rattling sound from above him because the skip that was crawling up the tunnel 100 feet above him had broken and tons of rock were about to fall straight down that shaft onto his head. So he flattened himself up against the wall and the rock came down all in front of him, but he didn't escape entirely. Like these massive pieces of rock were hitting his chest and his shoulders, and he's got bruises all over his body. But the worst thing is when they fell, there was a steam pipe above him and the steam pipe burst. And so hissing steam starts coming out of the wall of the shaft and filling up the tunnel, which is like, so it's burning his nose and it's burning his lungs and it's smothering him. Like you can't breathe. Yeah. And so he's like, the only thing I can do is jump into this water. So he jumps into this tunnel of icy water that's in front of him that the pump is supposed to be vacating.
There's so many things that can go wrong.
I know.
So many.
And so he swims away from the tunnel under the water and just prays that they're going to realize that this has happened up above. And that not before long, an engineer realizes that the pressure has gone down, and he turns the valve and turns off the steam to that pipe. And so the friend of this writer like swims back out towards the shaft and pulls. There's like a signal bell that you can pull at every tunnel. And so he pulls the signal bell, and they lower a car to get him back up, and he climbs back up, and he's just weak. He's bruised all over, but he says he will never again doubt if a voice talks to him in the dark of a coal mine and says, do not go under that, down to that shaft.
Right.
No.
So, maybe it was the knockers looking out for him, if that's the way they look at it. But the belief in these, whether people looked at them as gnomes or ghosts, the belief remained like well into the 20th century. And there's a story on the Wikipedia page on this that like a large mine closed in 1956 even. And the owners had sealed the entrance of the mine. Cornish miners from it's like 4, 5, 6 generations from their immigration to the country had put out a petition asking the owners of the mine to reopen the doors so they would set the knockers free to work in other mines to keep other people safe. And the owners actually complied.
Oh, wow.
And so, it was that big of a deal. But that is the story of the non-alien Tommyknockers.
Tommyknockers.
Oh, wow.
They're here to help you.
Right?
They don't want you to torture your dog.
No. Jesus.
Listen to them.
Listen to the knockers.
I mean,
Listen to your Tommyknocker, okay?
I was thinking like,
He's trying to help you.
used to
But you got to bake for him.
bake for your knocker.
the level of severity if you don't listen in a mine is way more than me when I was young, and I would be afraid to run to the bathroom in the dark, and I would hear something being like, don't go in there.
Like you're probably not going to get crushed to death if you decide to go to the bathroom anyway.
I was thinking like if I listened every time I heard the voice tell me don't do that, I would not be going anywhere.
I hear a voice every morning go, don't get up.
Don't get up. Every day, Patrice.
Stay in bed.
Of
5
my
more
life.
minutes.
Every day. Every day. Yeah, I wouldn't have a job either.
True.
So relative, listen to the Tommyknockers.
Right. But it's true. Like, I've had so many experiences where I just had like just this feeling. Nobody's like whispering in my ear, but it's like kind of like the hair on the back of your neck or some little shift.
It's your red flag.
It's your red flag, and be like, hey, maybe you want to switch to that other lane.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, okay. So you do it, and then, you see like a car stopped in the middle of the lane that you didn't see before while you're doing 70 miles an hour and that you would have plowed into.
Shit.
So, listen to the hair on the back of your neck.
Yes, do it.
Mm-hmm.
Pay attention to the red flags. I feel like we're taking that for another podcast. I don't know.
Well, these little Tommyknocker cakes are delicious.
Yes, they're great.
Thank you so much so honestly, did you need it for 15 minutes?
I needed it for like 13 and a half months.
That's still badass.
Yeah, no way.
It really is. Like after 5 minutes, I'd been like, it's good enough. I'm not a perfectionist.
It wouldn't rise though. I had it in the oven and I was like, why are you not getting taller?
I would have been like, it's fine. It's flat.
I know.
Still eat.
It's flatter, but it's
You just
okay.
dip it in your coffee. It'll be fine.
That would be good.
Well, thank
Anyway.
y'all so much for listening. We appreciate you.
Thank you.
And we will talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye.